Welcome back. It's the last day of the month. But if you're watching from East Africa and around the world, this is Citizen News at 1. I'm Johnson Mwakazi. Now, the Judges and Magistrates Vetting Board has sacked 5 magistrates for failing the suitability to serve test. They could not account for large sums of money in their bank accounts. The magistrates included Michael Oduor Kizito, who was the principal magistrate of Mariakani, Teresa Mwangi, principal magistrate Wanguru Law Courts, Robinson Oigara Onyoni, acting senior principal magistrate, Wilson Kaberia Nkunja, senior principal magistrate in Kericho, and Okore Selesa, who was an acting principal magistrate. 11 others have been declared suitable to serve. Elizabeth Chepkoech Tanui, Christopher Yalwala, Faith Karimi, Mburu David, Naomi Wairimu, Ouko Peter, Richard Kipkemoi, Samson Omwenga, Benson Mushoki, Josephat Waititu, and Teresa Bosibor. Now, journalist Walter Barassa's application challenging his extradition to The Hague has been dismissed. In his judgment, Justice Richard Mwongo stated that the Rome Statute, which mandates Kenya to cooperate with the ICC, is part of the Kenyan laws and must be respected. The judge added that Barassa did not prove in his petition that it was unconstitutional to surrender him to the Hague-based court, adding that the issues he raised were premature at this stage. International Criminal Court prosecutor Fatou Bensouda issued a warrant of arrest against Barassa last year for allegedly interfering with witnesses. Barassa has, however, made an application to appeal against the judgment. All right, that particular story is subject to our feedback question, and we're asking you, do you support the extradition of Walter Barassa to The Hague? Do you support a decision to extradite Walter Barassa to The Hague? What do you think? Send your comments. The number is 22422. That's 22422, and we'll be glad to sample some of them. Remember to include your name and location, and of course, after your yes or no statement, please add 1 or 2, 3 more statements. Now, public servants working in devolved services across the country will start getting their salaries directly from their respective county governments starting end of next month. According to Deputy President William Ruto, though the devolution process has faced challenges, the handover of salary processing to county governments was necessary, adding that both levels of government will continue to hold consultations to ensure that it is successfully implemented. Ruto, who was speaking during the second Intergovernmental Budget and Economic Council meeting, asked the Senate to embark on the formulation of regulations to ease the devolution process. Ruto says the government has set aside 34 billion shillings for the construction of 92 hospitals across the country to ease the constraints facing the provision of quality health care. On their part, governors want the government to avail finances on time to counties to enable them provide services to the citizens.
And I want to call upon the Senate, which is the body charged with the responsibility of providing legislation for the better operation of county governments, to take up their responsibility and work with us and work with the county governments to develop a legal regime that will assist county government achieve their mandate.
Now, an IGAD meeting held in Addis Ababa on South Sudan has expressed concern over failure by the 2 warring groups in complying with the peace deal signed a week ago. While briefing the heads of states attending the ongoing AU summit in Addis Ababa, the IGAD Council called on the 2 parties in the conflict to stop fighting to allow the negotiation to move to the next phase. Francis Gashuri joins us from Addis Ababa.
A very good afternoon to you and to all our viewers from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. The 22nd African Union Summit is coming to a conclusion this afternoon. However, on the sidelines of this summit, the African heads of state and government who are members, whose countries are members of the Intergovernmental Agency on Development, that is IGAD, have been meeting on the sidelines of the summit to deliberate on a few issues, among them the crisis in South Sudan and the progress that has been made so far in an attempt to find a lasting solution to the conflict in the youngest nation in the continent. And the leaders, among them President Uhuru Kenyatta, have been briefed on the progress made so far by the mediation team co-chaired by Ambassador Seyum Mesfin and the retired General Lazaro Sumbeyo. And what has been happening is that the report that has been prepared by the mediation team, the highlight of that report is the breakthrough that was attained on the 23rd of this month here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, when the two warring factions agreed to sit together and put pen to paper on a cessation of hostilities agreement to silence the guns and open the way for the process of finding a lasting solution to the South Sudan crisis.
The conclusion of these two agreements paves the way to the next phase of negotiations on a comprehensive resolution of all outstanding political issues. I therefore appeal to the two parties to commit themselves to this stage of negotiations with a view to realizing national healing and reconciliation in the Republic of South Sudan.
However, there are concerns that the parties have not been very faithful to the cessation of hostilities agreement that they signed on the 23rd of January this year here in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, which is a cause of concern for the leaders in the region who now are apprehensive that such abuse of the agreement could lead to more bloodshed and even a greater humanitarian crisis, not only in South Sudan but also to the neighboring countries where the residents are fleeing to as an attempt to find a safe haven from the crisis in South Sudan.
Regarding the challenge, to mention briefly, failure to comply or to fully commit to the letter and spirit of the cessation of hostilities agreement, or to ensure compliance by all armed groups operating in areas controlled by the government or opposition forces, poses a threat to the next phase of the peace process. Moreover, the humanitarian crisis has reached serious proportions and, unless swiftly addressed, could complicate resolution of the crisis and place increased stress on the region.
The conclusion of these two agreements paves the way to the next phase of negotiations on a comprehensive resolution of all outstanding political issues. I therefore appeal to the two parties to commit themselves to this stage of negotiations with a view to realizing national healing and reconciliation in the Republic of South Sudan.
Another key highlight in the report prepared by the mediation team is the release of the political detainees who are a key ingredient in the process of finding a lasting solution to the South Sudan crisis. And so far, President Salva Kiir Mayardit has released to President Uhuru Kenyatta 7 of the 11 political detainees. However, the fate of the 4 detainees who are still in custody in South Sudan remains a critical issue for the mediation panel, and they are asking President Salva Kiir Mayardit to expedite the process of also releasing these other 4 detainees so that the peace process can be given a much needed boost.
I am pleased to report that the government of South Sudan released to me 7 of the 11 detainees this week, and this was a major step forward, and we continue to engage with our brother President Salva Kiir on the release of the remaining 4. However, since the signing of the 2 agreements, there has been accusations and counter-accusations of non-compliance to the agreements, and I therefore appeal to our brothers and sisters from South Sudan to put the interests of the suffering population first and comply with the agreements with a view to alleviating the situation.
The withdrawal of external forces that had been invited by the two warring factions to assist them in the clashes in South Sudan is also a matter that the IGAD mediation team wants the heads of state and government in the IGAD region to deal with, to ensure that there is a peaceful and smooth transition from that of clashes to a peaceful solution to the South Sudan crisis. And they are saying the presence of these foreign elements is complicating their situation because there are still concerns and hostilities, especially aggravated by the presence of these foreign troops.
Urge the parties to ensure the progressive withdrawal of armed groups and all allied forces invited by either side from the theater of operations as per the cessation of hostilities agreement.
The closing ceremony of the 22nd African Union Summit will be held in about an hour or two, and we should be able to update our viewers on the highlights of that closing ceremony and the key recommendations that will be made by the heads of state and government during this summit. From Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, reporting for Citizen TV, my name is Francis Gashuri.